Hello, everyone. Since we read about Luke chapter 2, verse 1 to 21, right? We read that, okay? And then right now, I want to focus on some of the Luke chapter 2, verses 1 to 21's notes, okay? So we can get more, dig into it, so get more background knowledge of the biblical knowledge, so we know what's going on, okay? In Luke chapter 2, verse 1 to 20, according to ESV, Study Bible says Jesus is born, whereas the birth of John, that means John the Baptist, is described in two verses in chapter 1, verse 57 to 58, which is here. See, now the time came for Elizabeth to give birth. She born a son, and her neighbors and relatives heard that the Lord, that means, has shown great mercy to her, and they rejoiced with her, with Elizabeth. That's the only. That's two words. That's it. Wrap up, okay? And then on the eighth day they circumcise the child, right? And they have him call him Zechariah after his father. But then later on, Mary answer no, and the neighbor asks, and they say, oh, they don't have the name of that call Zechariah, call John. So the neighbor none, and then they signal to their father John, tell them what the name, and then he's called John, right? But only talk about, according to Luke, it's only 57 and 58. Talk about two words, right? Only two words. So whereas the birth of John is described only two words, but the birth of Jesus Christ is greater one. That means Jesus is greater, right? Cover 20 verse from chapter 2 verse 2 verse 1, chapter 2 verses 1 to 20. See, 20 verse 21 is 2, but it talk about circumcision, okay? And he called him the name, just like as see, on the eighth day John the Baptist circumcised on the eighth day. So Jesus also circumcised on the eighth day, but it's not talk about his birth. So he's talking about circumcision. It's after the 8 days. So it's 20 verse from Luke chapter 1 all the way to chapter 20. He's talk about that day, okay? That day when Jesus is the birth of Jesus. And then this is end of 8 days. 8 days later. Okay, this is not talk about the birth. It's talk about 8 days later, circumcision. So, right? So this is about the Bible too. Okay, important. But I'm just want to focus, okay? So in verses 1 to 20, Luke chapter 1 to 20, talk about the birth of Jesus. That Jesus is born. Whereas the birth of John is described only two verses. Two. So 2 and verses 20 is 10 times more, okay? So the birth of Jesus is 10 times more greater. And the birth of Jesus is greater one. Cover 20 verse. I'm not saying John the Baptist is not important. He's very important, okay? He's a big cousin of Jesus Christ, the forerunner of Jesus, pointing others to Jesus and to repent, and then pointing people to Jesus. But then I'm talking about Jesus is greater. Cover 20 verse. So I hope you make sense, right? Because the pattern of how Luke the doctor, he talk about Jesus for 20 verse, and then talk about 8 days later circumcision. And then he called him Jesus and given by the angel which he was conceived in the womb, right? So same thing here, right? You see the pattern? He talk about John the Baptist, the birth of John the Baptist. Only two verses described. Now, the time came Elizabeth to give birth, and then the neighbor and relative heard of the Lord, that the Lord has shown great mercy to her, and then they rejoiced with her. That's it. That's it. And then talk about 8 days later stuff, 8 days circumcision. So I want to point this out, okay, to us, and then we'll go to the West.